Bean.
And I'm Callie. And today we're going to go over all the books we read in the month of March, which is a little late, but so
Better late than never.
So first I read The Crimes of Grindelwald by J.K. Rowling. This is actually just the screenplay to the movie that came out back in November. I read it because I'm a dork, and look how pretty it is.
It's a very pretty
It's very pretty. But no, I tend to zone out while watching movies at the theater, and we saw it premiere night, so there are times where I missed the dialogue, so this was always a good way for me to sort of actually understand what happened in the movie, opposed to that, like, after-movie, like, brain fart that everyone has. So this was sort of, I read it a couple months later. Obviously, this is a March read. It came out in November. Yeah, so I give this 5 stars because the movie was amazing. If you haven't seen it, do it.
So I'm going to go with the first book that I read this month. Actually, I do not have a physical copy of it because I listened to the audiobook. And that book is called Dance of Cloaks, and it's the first book in the Shadow Dance series by David Dalglish. But basically, this is a book about a 13-year-old who finds himself as a part of a crime family. So he's actually an assassin, so he jumps rooftops and goes around and murders people. But then he realizes that he doesn't really want to do that. He'd rather be a Robin Hood, so he really wants to help people, but he also doesn't know how to do that. So he's just full of this awkward cinnamon roll, and I just love awkward cinnamon rolls who want to kill people.
Everyone loves an awkward cinnamon roll in a book.
Especially one that wants to kill people. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars.
I read the whole Lunar Chronicles series.
And I read this one.
She read Cinder.
I reread Cinder.
Because I kept gushing about how much I loved it, so she felt the need to reread.
Callie, what did you give this
I
series?
gave Cinder a 5 as well, which really surprised me. I was really hesitant to read this series because I hate Cinderella.
It took
like,
a lot of convincing for me to get her to read it.
With
It
a
really did.
burning passion. I hate Cinderella. It's my least favorite Disney movie. It's my least favorite fairy tale. I hate it. So when she was like, it's a futuristic Cinderella, I'm like, fuck that.
And then I told her that it was a cyborg, too.
But I love Cinder. She's not my favorite character. Let's be real, everyone's favorite character is Cress.
It's true. It's true.
But I gave Cinder, Scarlet, Cress, Winter, and Stars Above, all 5 stars. Because I love how each book is focused on a different character, and we're introduced slowly, but it's not a slow burn story.
Mm-hmm. No,
It
takes off and it goes and it doesn't stop.
Yes, it just keeps going. It kept me entertained. I read, I think, like 1 book like a day because I have no life. With Fairest, I gave this one 3 stars because reasons and plot, and I hate her.
This book was technically supposed to make you, like, understand Levana, and honestly just made me hate her more.
Yeah, it made me hate her more.
So.
Like, I love getting the background of a villain. Like, I am all for a good villain backstory and learning about why they became who they became. And don't get me wrong, felt bad. I did. But I still hate her. Which is not a good reason to give a 3 to a book, because it's still well written and it's a great story. I couldn't get over this book. I was constantly angry. Just constantly mad. And that's why I gave this one 3 stars. But as the series as a whole, I'd give the whole series a 5. Just because...
Easily.
Oh, it was just so good. Cress is my favorite cinnamon roll.
Yes.
And I love her. And just all the characters were so complex for, like, taking them from different little fairy tales. And I loved it so much.
The next book I read was actually the first nonfiction book that I read this month. So just a little background, I try to read 2 nonfiction books a month just because I have quite a few and I like to learn things. I'm not in school right now, but I still like to learn things and learn about the world that we're in because I really don't know anything. I'm kind of clueless about shit.
Aren't we all?
True. So this book, again, I listened to the audiobook. So I don't have a physical copy, but it's a really pretty one, and this book actually came out in March. Okay, so it actually came out at the beginning of March. I heard about it on the Book Riot podcast.
Anything we mention, we'll leave link down below.
So this book was The Lady from the Black Lagoon, Hollywood Monsters and the Legacy of Millicent Patrick by Mallory O'Meara.
Yes.
This book is a book about Millicent Patrick, as it says in the title, who's actually the creator of The Creature from the Black Lagoon, the 1954 black and white horror film, which I actually ended up watching afterwards, and it was so good. I really enjoyed it. And I'm not one for, like, scary movies or anything like that, but I love black and white movies. This book was so inspiring, and it just talked about all of the struggles that so many women have had to go through in order to get into film and to get their stuff recognized, and all of the, pardon my language, but all of the crap that Millicent Patrick went through, because she actually went on tour when the movie first came out, and then she came back from tour from promoting this movie, and they fired her. She was not given any credit for the creature that she made because one of the guys got jealous. But honestly, like, it was so inspiring to listen to all of the stuff that she did, how hard she worked to get to where she was, and the fact that she did get kicked out of this movie, but her creature is one of the most remembered monsters in all of cinematic history. Like, that is an inspirational monster now. And then she goes on and she does other things too. So it's really quite cool. I highly recommend this to anyone who is interested in film or any interest in feminism at all. I gave this one 5 out of 5. Alright, so the next book I read, I do have a physical copy of. It is The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. This is the first book in the King Killer Chronicles. Say that 5 times fast.
Nope.
Okay. And this is, oh my gosh, like, I could gush about this book for hours. It is seriously one of my favorite books of the year. And it's gorgeous. Like, let's be honest here. This is a high fantasy book. This is actually the 10th anniversary edition of this book. And the cool thing about this is that there are actually images throughout the book that go along with the story and where it's at. And they're really gorgeous images, and they fit so well, and they kind of help you visualize a little bit more about what's going on. But for anyone who doesn't know what this is about, this follows a young man from when he's like a boy up to early 20s, late teens, something like that. I'm not exactly positive, not gonna lie. But he's a musician and he wants to learn magic. So he's learning, the whole idea is he wants to learn the name of the wind so he can call the wind whenever he wants to. And that is considered like the top magic. The most powerful you can be is to learn the name of the wind.
Yeah.
His family was a group of traveling musicians, and they were killed by this ancient being that isn't supposed to exist anymore, but it literally just decimates his entire family. And I love this book. I cannot recommend it enough. If you love high fantasy, just go read it. Just go read it. The second one's out. The third one is supposed to come out. There's also a novella that I have just gotten my hands on.
Ooh.
And it's pretty.
Gotta love novellas.
Yes. Obviously 5 out of 5.
Next book I read is actually Sarah's copy that she didn't bring over from her house because we both forgot that it was her copy, which is Howl's Moving Castle by Diane Wynne Jones. I read this book because Sarah told me to, because we got into some tangent about Studio Ghibli, and she asked me if I'd ever read the actual Howl's book, which I learned at that moment that Howl's was based off of a book. And I was all about that. Didn't know that. So Howl's Moving Castle was the very first Studio Ghibli film I ever saw. I saw it in theaters like way back in 2004. It's awesome. So it holds a place in my heart. I love Studio Ghibli now. But unfortunately, because I had such a love for the movie and the movie's plot, I didn't quite care for the book. I gave it 3 stars. I gave it 3 stars because I did like learning. Like, we get to learn more about, like, Howl's family and his background, but the plot was completely different from the film. The villain was completely different. I won't spoil anything, but I didn't quite care for it. I probably won't read the other 2 books. But I know she really liked it, and I did have a better appreciation for Howl's Moving Castle after I read the book, because after you read a book that has a movie, you gotta watch it.
It's true. Like you said, I think that's why I enjoyed the book so much, is because you just learn so much more about Howl. Like, in the movies, he's great, don't get me wrong.
You know nothing about him.
He's just there, and that's all you know. And it's like, okay, who the heck are you?
Yeah,
what do you do?
It just
and
it gives more perspective on who he is as a person.
Where he came from.
I did prefer Book Howl over Movie
Yes,
Howl.
that's a very common thing I've seen over the place.
But I preferred movie plot over book plot.
So my next book is going to take a complete turn from my last book, and I read a middle grade. This is The Backstagers and the Ghostlight by Andy Mientus, and it's illustrated by Ryan Tsai. So this is a novelization that is based off of the graphic novel series The Backstagers, and that's literally what it is. It's just like an overload on cuteness and gay boys in the theater. It's just a really cute book, and it's hard to really describe it, but basically the backstage area is this big magical place, and all of the rooms keep moving, so you never know where you're going to find the next room, and they're attempting to map it out. It's just really cute, and I highly recommend it, especially if you enjoy middle grade books. So this one got 4.5 out of 5 for me.
Next book I read was Crown of Feathers by Nikki Pau-Preto. I obviously have the Owl Crate edition because just look how pretty it is. And it's got pretty edges. So Crown of Feathers, the only thing I'd ever heard about it, like I kept seeing this cover everywhere, but I never knew what it was about. Like it has a phoenix on it. I was kind of already sold.
And there's someone on the phoenix.
And there's someone on the phoenix. Like that's awesome. So when I read that it was a tale about sisters with phoenix riders, with like past lore of a war that's still kind of going on. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was everything it said it was. It was sisters which I really like. A lot of books I notice when they have sister relationships, it's so unrealistic. It's like, oh my god, I love you. No, they fight a lot. Like it was a very realistic telling of siblings, and they're on their own, so obviously the older sibling who's not the main character. Our main character is Veronica. Veronica and her sister Val, they try and get Veronica's whole dream in life is to become one of these like revered phoenix riders that supposedly don't exist, so she goes off on her own, leaving her sister behind after a big fight, and tries to find these phoenix riders, but when she finds them, they're only accepting boys. So Veronica has to...
Well, then.
I mean... Rude. So she disguises herself as a boy and goes to the Phoenix Rider camp to try and gain admittance. And she learns a lot about the past war, what happened. She meets... This book is in 2 perspectives. It's in the perspective of Veronica and in the perspective of he's the son of the Phoenix Riders leader. His name is Tristan. So it's also in his perspective of shouldering that extra pressure because his dad is the leader and his dad wants him to be the best. So it's really in these 2 people's perspective, and they meet. Tristan wants to train up Veronica. I really liked it. I will say, like, at the beginning, I'm like, oh, I know what the twist is. I was wrong, sir. Holy crap. The last, like, I think 50 or 100 pages, I had to text her and be like, what's happening?
And I haven't read it.
She hasn't read it, and I'm just like, dude. But I would highly recommend it. I didn't give it 5 out of 5 because it's a lot bigger than I think it should have been. I think it could have been cut down a couple, like 50 to 100 pages. There was just some extra fluff and whatnot. But other than that, it's mainly all action. There's very little romance in this.
All right. The next book I read was actually an ebook, so again, I don't have a physical copy, so we're going to put it right here. And it's Better Homes and Hauntings by Molly Harper. This is actually a reread. I reread this book every year. It's a 5-star every time I read it. And it is literally just a cute romance that involves a haunted house on an island and a gardener, a millionaire, who basically invents the book's version of Facebook. His deceased ancestors, who they're trying to figure out who killed his great-great-great-grandmother. But I gave it 5 out of 5. I love this book. It makes me very happy. It makes me smile. It makes me laugh. There's nerdy references throughout the entire thing. Makes me very happy.
That's awesome.
In my nerdy soul.
Next books I read, I actually read these while I was on vacation. So I read them fairly quickly. I read the Anna Justin Blood Duology by Kendare Blake. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I really only read this because I read Kendare Blake's other series, 3 Dark Crowns, and I loved her writing style. I loved the world she built. So when I heard that this was very supernatural based, because it was just, it gave me such supernatural vibes, which I love supernatural. It's about a kid named Cass he's basically a Sam and Dean Winchester, but by himself. Younger, yeah. He's only like 16. But he's been doing this so that he can avenge his father. And he goes to Canada with his mom to find this house because he heard of all this lore about Anna dressed in blood who haunts this house, and they don't find bodies. Like, anyone who goes in there just disappears and is gone. So it's really cool. It's all in his perspective. He meets new people. Because he travels so much with doing this job, he doesn't make a lot of friends, but he makes friends with a psychic and, like, the popular girl in school, which was so weird to me, but kind of cute. Because the psychic was, like, a dork of the school.
Yep.
But I really liked it. It was just a cute but scary, like, story. He got to talk to Anna, and Anna's character was amazing. I didn't think I would like a ghost that much, but it was awesome, and I really enjoyed it. So naturally, after that one, I read the second book, Girl of Nightmares, which I gave a 2 out of 5. I think this book suffered a lot from second book syndrome because it just weird comparatively to the tone of the first one. The first one ended really nicely. It could have been a standalone. This added kind of more background. Like, it was just, it wasn't needed. It made me not like a lot of the characters I loved in the first book. It didn't have a lot of depth. It was all like pining and whiny. This felt more teenager-y than that one. The other one, the characters they didn't feel like whiny 15, 16-year-olds. They felt like our age, young adults. Whereas this one, you get that, which I get, they are teenagers and they're whiny and piney. I get it. But I don't like to read about it.
Especially not after a first one that's not like.
Yeah, like, it felt like a flip on, like, the character development. And this one, it ended very similarly to the first book, so it felt kind of pointless to me.
That's unfortunate.
Like, so I would recommend reading Anna Dressed in Blood, but think of it as a standalone. If you want to read this one, it does just give more background.
So the next book I read was also an audiobook, and it's Peril at End House by Agatha Christie. This is the 8th book in the Hercule Poirot series. So I'm not going to tell you much about what it is about because they're all about murders.
They're all murder mysteries, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, and this one is someone gets shot in someone's yard while they're all watching fireworks. I gave it a 4 out of 5. It was probably the most underwhelming Agatha Christie book I have listened to so far, which isn't saying much because they've all been really, really good, and this one was still very well done. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. It was a great story, but it's the same characters, solving mysteries. I highly recommend Agatha Christie. If you like murder mysteries, read Agatha Christie.
Oh, the next book I read, I actually did an audiobook, but I have several copies of it, and that is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Neither of us are Gryffindors. In case the shirt wasn't obvious, she's a Hufflepuff. We're working on getting her swag. So Chamber of Secrets isn't probably my favorite out of the whole series. I always give it a 5 out of 5 just because it's Harry Potter. It holds a perfect spot in my heart. So my favorite one is the 3rd and the 7th.
So the next book I got was actually a library book, which is why I don't have a physical copy of it, and that was No Exit by Taylor Adams. This is a thriller. It also came out this year, and it basically, this girl gets stuck in a big snowstorm, and she ends up having to get off the freeway, and she gets stuck at this rest stop with, I believe it's 6 people total. And so there's 6 cars out in the parking lot, and she goes out to her car to try and make a phone call, and notices that in the back of a van, there is a child in a cage. It's her figuring out who has put this child in a cage. But it's so interesting because the main character's name is Darby, and she basically gets to know every single person who is there. You actually end up caring about everyone in the story, or at least I did. Darby herself, who's like the hero of the story, she's not a good person. Not like one of those characters that you want to be, but she's a great person in this story. So I thought that was kind of a cool I gave that book 5 out of 5, in case you hadn't figured that out by now. But the next book I read is another audiobook. When the Irish Invaded Canada, The Incredible True Story of the Civil War Veterans Who Fought for Ireland's Freedom by Christopher Klein. This one is another one that I got off of a podcast. It was very well researched and a well written book. I just didn't find it as interesting as I had hoped it was, because I had never heard about anyone ever invading Canada.
Yeah.
Like, why would you invade
does
Canada?
that?
Honestly, this book, like, it went in my head and kind of went out. But I still gave it a 3.5 because, honestly, the research that went into this book had to have been super extensive. It's a long book.
Yeah.
And it was well researched and well written, and it was a good story, but I just wasn't interested. So, 3.5. So the next book I read was, I finally read Angels and Demons by Dan Brown. This is the first book in the Robert Langdon series. And this one actually, it's the first book. This is where we meet Robert Langdon. We figure out who the heck he is, what he did. Okay, so basically, Angels and Demons, it does follow what the movie is. So if you've seen the movie, you know what happens in the book. It is actually really similar, which I was actually quite excited about. But this is really well done. I really like the fact that everything, all of the artifacts and everything that he has in these books are actually where he says they are. So it's not like he made up things.
Right.
He didn't make up artifacts. He didn't make up these books or these paintings, anything like that. They actually do exist, and they are actually where he says they are. So I was impressed with the fact that the female in here, Victoria, she is a brilliant scientist, and they depicted her as a brilliant scientist. Mm-hmm. And I think Dan Brown does that wonderfully. Like, Victoria is brilliant. I think this was really well done, and I'm actually continuing the series. I am reading The Da Vinci Code this month. I gave this 4 out of 5. 4.5 out of 5.
The last book that I read this month was Warrior of the Wild by Tricia Levenseller. And honestly, the only reason I read this book, this was like a last-minute decision for me to bring up vacation, because the day before I left for vacation, Sarah and I actually met Tricia Levenseller and Alexandra Christo, who is the author of To Kill a Kingdom. Tricia Levenseller also wrote the Daughter of the Pirate King duology. I got this one signed and personalized. We met them.
They're so nice.
They are so adorable, and I loved them.
Oh my god.
It was so cute. And the way she described her thought process for this book is the reason I chose to read it first, was she built this entire book over this picture of the axe. Mm-hmm. Like, she built just this...
She wanted to write a book about an axe. And so she had an axe. And then wrote the story.
And then wrote the book. Like, that's awesome. And then, which she actually wrote in her dedication page, a quote from Gimli from Lord of the Rings, which just says, "Bring your pretty face to my axe." And when she said that, I'm like, I need this in my life. I am a huge Lord of the Rings nerd. Mm-hmm. I love it. This was probably one of my favorite books this month. I gave this 5 out of 5. It was so well done. She just built this hard world where swords were useless. You needed axes to open things, to survive. So this follows Resmira, who is the daughter of the chief, who gets sabotaged on her coming-of-age trial. So when you fail your coming-of-age trial, you get sent out into the wild, which has these giant monsters, and they give you a task where if you complete the task, you get to come back with full honors, all of that kind of stuff. But usually it's a death sentence. So they give her the task of killing a god. And it's killing the god who's been tormenting their villages for years, taking away their food, their money. So she gets cast out, and she has just this tenacity, like, I'm gonna do it. Like, those bastards think I can't do it. Like, and she meets these two boys out in the wild who've been there for a year, Soren and Eric, who have just given up. They've given up. They're like, they don't want us to come back. That's why they gave us such hard trials. Mm-hmm. Like, they've just given up, and they're trying to just survive. When Resmira comes, she gives them this, like, motivation to get back and go back home because Eric has a lover back home and it's a boy, which I loved. And then Soren and Resmira, this was just such a, and it's short, like it's not a long story, but there's so much history. You learn so much about these characters and their personalities, and it was just so well done.
The last book I read was Wild Beauty by Anna Marie McLemore. I give this a 2.5 out of 5, and the reason for that... Okay, so a big thing about Anna Marie McLemore is she has very flowery writing. Like, excessively flowery. It was a good plot. It was a great idea. These women are stuck in a garden, and every time they fall in love with someone, the garden basically consumes them, and they disappear forever. Like, the concept is interesting and great, but the writing was so flowery, I kept getting distracted. This style of writing just did not mesh with me at all. And so it was a struggle. I did give it a 2.5 out of 5.
My favorites this month were Warrior of the Wild and Cress from the Lunar Chronicle.
Two favorites are The Name of the Wind and No Exit.
So these would be the 4 that we would highly recommend. Obviously, don't read Cress if you haven't read Cinder and Scarlet, but
yes.
Whatever.
If you liked what you saw today, feel free to subscribe, hit the button below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified whenever we put up new videos.
We put up new videos every Tuesday and Fridays now. Feel free to comment us with questions. We'll put all of our handles on there. Instagram. She has a blog you can go and read. Anything we mentioned, like the podcast she mentioned. So yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye!